Katie Pavlich, editor of townhall.com and Fox News contributor. We have Hugh Hewitt, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show. We have Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and co-author of Breitbart Business Digest. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on. I'm sure you're going to tear apart my opening and go right ahead. Katie Pavlich, I'm going to let you do it. I know everybody's saying Trump got lost everything, this and that and the other thing. I just have it through a different lens. But Katie Pavlich, you know more about this than I do. What do you think? Weigh in for me, please.
Well, I would never tear apart the great Larry Kudlow's riff. Absolutely not. Look, when we look at the purpose of these debates, we are in a presidential election cycle. The purpose is to serve the American people on issues that they care about, and this debate did not do that. The number one issue for people in this country is the economy. Inflation has destroyed family budgets. It has destroyed livelihoods. It has destroyed the American dream for millions of Americans all across the country. And the number two issue, of course, is illegal immigration, which is directly tied to the economy and this horrific inflation that we've seen as a result of the Biden-Harris open border and sending in 15, 20 million new people into the country, and then refusing to acknowledge that maybe some of the housing shortage is absolutely because of illegal immigrants taking away the very scarce housing that is available to people in this country. Those two things are very little talked about, and so I think that there was a huge disservice done to people when it comes to those two things. And right now, as it stands, because Kamala Harris didn't answer any questions on this, the first question to her was, are we better off economically today than we were 4 years ago? She didn't answer the question because she cannot answer the question honestly. The answer is no. And so I think that'll stick with people. They're asking them to basically say, vibes of the Kamala Harris campaign, compare it and ignore what your life was like under Trump.
Well, okay, so I'll go to Alex Marlow on this. I mean, Trump hit... I argue not enough. I don't think he said enough about economy. I don't think he said enough about economic growth. I don't think he said quite enough about his specific policies on taxes and spending, and he could have mentioned Elon Musk. But he did hit hard when he had a chance. I mean, you know, the moderators are very biased against him. But he did hit hard on it, and Kamala didn't seem to have a response. So let's take up what Katie is saying, Hugh, Alex. On the economy, on inflation, on border, how would you rate this? I mean, do you think that Kamala Harris comes out ahead of Trump on that or not?
No, absolutely not. I thought what Trump did actually it was okay. It was pretty good. He called her a Marxist, which she is, but next time maybe add a specific, like she wants price controls, which never works. It leads to shortages. So he could push it a step further. He could mention what we talked about last time I was on with you, Larry, about his trade policy, how it's very effective, doesn't lead to inflation, unlike all of the Joe Biden policies that Kamala Harris rubber stamped. But overall, she was terrible. She wouldn't answer a single question. She was smug. She was smirking, she was rolling her eyes, she was obfuscating on every single issue. We counted at least 21 major lies that her chaperones at ABC Disney protected her from. Trump was getting pummeled by 3 people at once. He looked very presidential, he took it very seriously, and she looked like she was really new at this.
Hugh Hewitt, your take on any of this?
Well, I want to say kudos on your riff, Larry, because the oldest cliche in news is also true. First reports are usually wrong.
Oh,
and the first reports last night are that, Trump lost, Harris won. Over the course of the day, I have been seeing 3 things emerge. Trump was okay. Not his best, but he did get in some haymakers. His closing statement was best. And anytime you're focusing on migration, you're winning. Kamala Harris, by contrast, was at her best, and it wasn't very good. And then third, and I think this matters a lot, it was the worst presidential debate in modern history. I do not believe even an independent or even a moderately fair Democrat will conclude other than that was an ambush. And as that settles in, as people study what Alex just referred to, the vice president did not answer one question, nor did ABC, which is owned by Disney, ask one question about China. Not one question. I was thinking of their theme parks, their merchandising.
Yep.
I'm thinking about the NBA. They didn't talk about China. Not one question about Iran. They did not bring up our hostage who was executed along with 5 others in Israel on the 10/7. I am so amazed at the unprofessionalism and the deeply disrespectful of America, as Katie mentioned, performance by ABC. I think by the weekend, Trump may have won this. It's a moving river of opinion that gathers force. And at this point, yeah, I wanted more. I wanted perfection. But that was the best the vice president's ever going to be. She's not very good.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, Hugh, that you and we're basically on the same page. Look, I don't think it was. These things are so difficult. You can always do better. I mean, that's the thing. There's a few things I would have loved Mr. Trump to add on. There's a few things I spoke to him about, but it didn't get in. Okay, that's life in the fast lane. But Katie, I mean, to Hugh's point, let me go back. Harris lied about Trump's record on abortion. Didn't she say at one point, you would sign a national ban on abortion? Now, he has said how many times that he opposes a national ban. On the fertilization, in vitro fertilization, she accused him. She lied about that. She lied about this whole 2025 study or whatever it's called. He has said 1,000,000 times. I mean, that stuff, that's just garbage. It's nonsense, Katie. She's throwing that out, and Trump is knocking it back. I mean, he did what he needed to do there.
Trump's answer on the abortion question, I thought, was one of the best of the night, actually. He finally did what Republicans should have been doing since Roe v. Wade was overturned, which is flipping the tables on the left and explaining how radical they actually are and out of touch with the country. He asked her, do you support any kind of limitations on abortion? And she wouldn't answer the question. And, of course, with the moderator helpfully saying that you can't have an abortion up to 9 months in any state. That's not true. There are at least 5 places in the United States, Washington, D.C., New Mexico, other states where you can have an abortion up to 9 months. So she helped out with that. But back to the questions that were not asked by the moderators. And again, the disrespect shown to the American people here. This was a debate where the questions were basically what the MSNBC primetime lineup would have asked. January 6th, Charlottesville, not debunking that lie, not following with a fact check on that when it's been debunked by a number of far left fact checkers, so to speak, and rather than current issues that are affecting people today. And quite frankly, they're trying to help Kamala Harris, and maybe, as Hugh pointed out, it will end up hurting her in the long run. Yeah, no, those are good points. I agree. I mean, Alex, Marlow, it's a bit odd, as Katie has said. I mean, the economy is the number one issue, immigration perhaps number 2, or maybe call them both number 1, whatever. They just asked one question on the economy right at the start. And actually, Trump got rolling on that. And, Alex, the way I saw it, Trump got rolling on that, and then they stopped. They put the brakes on and started going off to all these MSNBC-type questions that Katie's describing. What do you mean? I mean, Alex, that is an oddity, is it not?
It is. And the worst part of the debate was how much time was wasted with the moderator distractions and with the meaningless choices of topics they chose to focus on. But the best part was the opening and the closing, the opening part that she could not answer that first question, which is the fundamental question, are Americans better off now than when Donald Trump left office? She had no answer. And he was able to get in some points. He should hit this harder next time. But he was able to get in some points about how the economy was thriving under him. And she tried to lie her way out of explaining why there's been no growth, why the Bidenomics is what it is, which has been a disaster for her.
I just got 2 more things for you. You're all wonderful, and I appreciate it very much. Hugh Hewitt, regarding foreign policy, you were mentioning China, which never came up, which is almost tragic. But I thought that Mr. Trump punched away pretty good on the catastrophe in Afghanistan, and Hugh, how that you could connect the dots from that Afghanistan catastrophe into Putin, Russia invading Ukraine. I don't know. You're a foreign policy expert, among other things. Do you think Mr. Trump made those points?
He began to. He said, look, we had an agreement. It was a condition-based agreement. Mike Pompeo negotiated. They broke the conditions. We were not going to withdraw. You did withdraw. It was catastrophic. He could have gone on then to the Arlington Cemetery controversy, and he didn't. But generally speaking, that was very good. The difficulty is, I'm a lawyer. Kamala Harris is a lawyer. I've been a law professor for 27 years. We're very good at saying nothing at great length. That's what she did. Donald Trump is a developer. He can smell a rat in about 5 seconds. And he knew there was an ambush after the second question on abortion, and he got mad. He can't get mad. Larry, you work for him. He can't get mad because then he rushes, and that's unfortunate.
Well, unfortunately, I have to agree with that. Last one, Katie Pavlich, is there going to be a second debate in your judgment?
I hope so. I don't know if there will be. Donald Trump offered Kamala Harris 3 debates initially. She only accepted 1. Now she wants another one. I do think that it would be helpful to the country if there were debate moderators hosted on a network, hopefully Fox News, where they ask substantive questions that Americans are actually interested in to help them make their decision for the presidential election in November.
It would be helpful, wouldn't it? Anyway, all of you, thank you ever so much. Katie Pavlich, Hugh Hewitt, Alex Marlow, I'm indebted. Terrific
Thanks,
panel.
Larry.
Appreciate it.